Welcome to Science and Technology Briefing. The content of the briefing includes: can you solve it? Are you a lion of logic? Driverless cars go rogue on San Francisco's anarchic streets. Atos Chairman Meunier steps down amid shareholders' uproar. EU seeks to ease US tariff, green subsidy threats. Israel latest, Blinken set to return as US tries to contain war. Can you solve it? Are you a lion of logic? The Guardian. The Football School Encyclopedia, a children's book series that uses football as a lens to explore the world, has revealed a geometrical curiosity about the shape of the goal area. In 1891, when painted pitch markings were introduced, the goal area was in the shape of a B. Each curved part of the B is a segment of the locus of a point 6 yards from each goalpost. Driverless cars go rogue on San Francisco's anarchic streets. Telegraph. Waymo's driverless taxis have faced a string of incidents in San Francisco, knocking confidence in the technology. Waymo's vehicles have been involved in more crashes than Cruise, 103 compared to 68, although both companies say the majority of these were the fault of the human driver in the other car. San Francisco's police and fire departments have both criticized the services, saying they are not ready, while protesters have launched campaigns against the vehicles, seeking to disable them by placing traffic cones on their bonnets. But while Cruise has been forced to rein in its fleet, Waymo last week expanded citywide services to tens of thousands of customers. Saswat Panigrahi, Waymo's chief product officer, says its comparative success is the result of a safety-first approach. The company's cars have conducted 20 miles of real-world testing, and in virtual simulations, they have driven 20 billion miles. Atos Chairman Meunier steps down amid shareholders' uproar. Reuters. Bertrand Meunier has stepped down as chairman of Atos following criticism from minority shareholders over the company's plan to sell parts of its business to Czech tycoon Daniel Kretinsky. Jean-Pierre Mustier, former CEO of UniCredit, will take over as chairman and will be tasked with rebuilding investor trust and securing the deal with Kretinsky. Atos also announced that it expects the sale of tech foundations to Kretinsky to be completed in the second quarter of 2024. If the deal falls through, Atos may need to sell additional assets or access debt and equity markets to maintain liquidity. EU seeks to ease US tariff, green subsidy threats. Reuters. The European Union, EU, will aim to prevent the return of Trump-era metals tariffs and address the negative impact of the US Inflation Reduction Act, IRA, and its subsidies for electric vehicles during a summit with the US this week. The summit, hosted by US President Joe Biden, will focus on transatlantic unity on Ukraine and economic topics. One key issue will be a proposed joint statement on tackling global overcapacity of steel and aluminium and promoting sustainable production. The US has asked the EU to take action against Chinese steel producers in exchange for avoiding the reimposition of tariffs on EU steel and aluminium. The EU is also seeking to reconcile its carbon border tariff system with the US approach to promoting a greening of its economy through subsidies. Israel latest, Blinken set to return as US tries to contain war. Bloomberg. President Joe Biden is considering a trip to Israel after receiving an invitation from Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, according to sources familiar with the discussions. The U.S. is currently engaged in diplomatic efforts to address the Israel-Hamas conflict and provide humanitarian aid to Gaza. Secretary of State Antony Blinken is set to return to Israel on Monday for the second time since the conflict began. Meanwhile, Israel's military has continued to target Hamas commanders, and violence has escalated on the border with Lebanon. Efforts to prevent the conflict from spreading have helped stabilize financial markets. In the market inside a startup struggle in a higher-for-longer world. Reuters. Data tracking software startup, Tractive, is struggling to stay afloat after a deal with Marvel Studios fell through due to layoffs at Disney and Hollywood strikes. The company needs $600,000 to $700,000 to keep going for a few more months, but a pullback in venture capital funding is making it difficult to find the necessary investment. Tractive's experience is emblematic of the challenges facing startups, and also demonstrates how higher interest rates have left them more vulnerable to external shocks. AI chatbot helps farmers navigate a changing world. Japan Times. A new AI chatbot called Farmer.chat is helping farmers overcome modern agricultural challenges. The technology is seen as essential in dealing with food insecurity caused by global heating and the Ukraine war. It is expected to assist in the development of drought-resistant crops, early warning systems against climate change-driven weather disasters, and sustainable land management systems. Ismail Sarajeldin, former vice president of the World Bank, believes that the AI app will bring significant change to producers working on marginal lands. Paul Marshall, the hedge fund boss readying a bid for the Telegraph. Financial Times. Hedge fund manager Sir Paul Marshall and U.S. billionaire Ken Griffin are among the favorites to acquire the Telegraph newspapers and Spectator magazine. The publications are being put up for sale by Lloyds Banking Group in a deal that could reach over £500 million. Marshall is the co-founder of Marshall Wass and has become the latest wealthy individual to pursue media interests. He owns a 45% stake in upstart broadcaster GB News and digital media group Unheard. Marshall and Griffin are both enthusiastic supporters of free expression and British heritage. Marshall and Griffin are seen as credible owners of the Telegraph alongside other bidders, such as Lord Rothermere's DMGT. The Telegraph is the largest UK newspaper to be sold in almost 10 years. If Marshall is successful in his bid, he has signaled that he will not seek a seat on the Telegraph Group's board or be involved in its editorial agenda. Marshall's first media foray was Unheard, which he set up in response to frustration with the mainstream media. He has also invested in GB News, a right-leaning rival to dominant UK broadcasters. Marshall's interest in the Telegraph lies in his view that it has not yet realized its full potential, particularly in an international context. Digitalization gives it the opportunity to reach the entire Anglosphere. One person close to the sale of the Telegraph said the Marshall camp think that there is a Fox News-style void that the Telegraph can fill here, and that can be taken back to the US as a newspaper brand. Ladies and gentlemen, I am Six Doctor, your resident observer from the 6 Degrees world, here to bring you the latest news and insights. Let's dive in. In the world of football, we've discovered a geometrical curiosity about the shape of the goal area. Back in 1891, when painted pitch markings were introduced, the goal area was actually in the shape of a B. Each curved part of the B represents a segment of the locus of a point 6 yards from each goalpost. Who knew geometry could be so fascinating in the world of sports? Moving on to the streets of San Francisco, it seems that driverless cars are causing quite a stir. Waymo's driverless taxis have been involved in more crashes than Cruise, but both companies argue that most of these were actually the fault of human drivers. San Francisco's police and fire departments have criticized the services, while protesters have taken to placing traffic cones on the cars to disable them. Despite the controversy, Waymo has expanded its services to tens of thousands of customers. It seems their safety-first approach and extensive testing have paid off. In the business world, Atos Chairman Meunier has stepped down following criticism from minority shareholders. The company plans to sell parts of its business to Czech tycoon Daniel Kretinsky, and Jean-Pierre Mustier, former CEO of UniCredit, will take over as chairman to rebuild investor trust. If the deal falls through, Atos may need to sell additional assets or access debt and equity markets to maintain liquidity. It's a delicate situation, but hopefully, they can find a way to secure the deal and move forward. On the international stage, the European Union is seeking to ease the threat of US tariffs and green subsidies. During a summit with the US, they will focus on transatlantic unity and address issues such as global overcapacity of steel and aluminum and promoting sustainable production. The US has asked the EU to take action against Chinese steel producers in exchange for avoiding the reimposition of tariffs. It will be interesting to see how these discussions unfold and whether they can find common ground. Turning our attention to the Middle East, President Joe Biden is considering a trip to Israel after receiving an invitation from Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. The U.S. is actively engaged in diplomatic efforts to address the Israel-Hamas conflict and provide humanitarian aid to Gaza. Secretary of State Antony Blinken is set to return to Israel for the second time since the conflict began. Efforts to contain the conflict and prevent its spread have helped stabilize financial markets. In the world of startups, Tractive, a data tracking software startup, is struggling to stay afloat. A deal with Marvel Studios fell through, and the company is now facing difficulties in securing the necessary investment. This highlights the challenges startups face, especially in a higher interest rate environment. Let's hope they can find a way to navigate these challenges and keep innovating. And finally, let's talk about the power of AI. A new AI chatbot called Farmer.chat is helping farmers overcome modern agricultural challenges, such as food insecurity and climate change. This technology has the potential to make a significant impact in developing drought-resistant crops, early warning systems against weather disasters, and sustainable land management. It's exciting to see how AI can be a game-changer in the agricultural sector. That wraps up our news for today. Remember, I'm here to bring you the latest happenings and share my insights. Now, it's your turn. What are your thoughts on these stories? Do you have any questions or comments? I'm all ears. Thank you for tuning in. The content above showcases the latest briefing reports and analytical synopses, thoughtfully curated by the 6Do team. These insights stem from a wide array of reputable media outlets, think tanks, government sources, and specialized experts worldwide. We encourage you to explore these sources for a comprehensive perspective. Keep in mind that while the content may not always align with the official standpoint of 6Do Brief, it's not meant to be taken as absolute directives for decision-making. Comprising seasoned media professionals, learned scholars, and accomplished scientists, the 6Do team embodies a trailblazing, fully independent media entity. To customize 6Do Brief to meet your professional needs, you have the option to subscribe to a diverse array of briefings on our website, 6dobrief.com. Regardless of your location, you can conveniently receive 6Do Brief via email.